Hey, I'm Paul Keestead here with Austin Dennis. This is Full Send Cyber. This is our second episode. Today we're going to be going over how to attack certifications. And this is Austin Dennis. Austin, you want to kick it off?
Yes, so welcome to this episode. I think one of the things that a lot of people know, Paul and I is WGU, and one of the things with WGU is obtaining a lot of certifications. And so, especially Paul, after he graduated, is just like a new high-level certification every week. And so, I felt like a really good first episode for us to do. Full episode would basically be talking about how to obtain certifications efficiently because I think that there's a lot of people out there that they make these certifications into these giant mountains that you're going to have to conquer that take like months worth of study and just ridiculous amounts. Like they want you to enroll in an entire class, they want you to read an entire textbook, and it really doesn't take that. And with all the resources out there today, we basically want to just give you an outline and a long step, basically similar to what our process is, and that I think can be a pretty good, relatable thing. So, to start off with, step number one, I think that you need to think about finding a certification that you're interested in obtaining. I get people who will ask me, hey, should I get this certification or should I get that certification? Well, honestly, I think there's a couple different ways that you can look to do that. You can look in your local area and you can see different jobs that are actually being asked for employment because I think that's something people run into all the time is they go earn a certification because they think that it's popular. And then when they actually go and look at jobs in their area, literally nobody's asking for that certification at all. Like one thing that I got it for WGU because it was just required. I have never seen Network Plus in a job description at all. I'm not saying it's a bad certification. I think that it's probably something good, but there has never been a job description I've seen Network Plus. Another certification that I have that I went and just got it just because it's free is the certified in cybersecurity. Honestly, I think that was just something that ISC wanted to do because they get the $50 in member fees. The people are likely to, try to get more certifications from them. And I think that it's a good foundational thing, but certified in cybersecurity is not um, a job certification. It's just like a
Not
thing
at
to
all.
get you into the membership. So look for something that is actually going to get you a job and try to go for something like that. Don't get something just because other people get it or anything like that. And I'm saying that as someone that possesses two of those certifications I just mentioned, but do that. And then another thing is that you can look for one that is going to actually provide you with more knowledge to perform your job better or make you more qualified for a job. It isn't just sometimes you're not always just looking for experience. I don't think anything's useless. I think that Network Plus provided me with a lot of good information studying in a gun foundation. I'm not complaining about the certification. I'm just saying that sometimes there's different purposes for these. So you got to think about those things. Paul, you want to pick up?
Yeah, at least for someone like myself, and I'm sure a lot of other people are like this, certifications are kind of like they're a goal, they're a milestone. And they're a way for you to validate your experience and your competency in a certain given area. So, like for Network Plus, for instance, may not be on job descriptions. However, like if you're looking to round out your experience and proficiency in networking, it's a great cert to have. Is it going to give you the same like competency that a CCNA would? Absolutely not. However, these definitely serve as like good targets to meet. There's certifications that I've gotten just because I needed a compelling reason to like it gives you a path and a structure because a certification, they all have certification books and courses and whatnot. So it gives you structure and an end goal for that body of knowledge and whatnot. Um, so in picking certifications, what I usually try to do, um, I would look at the job descriptions that you're looking at and copy and paste like 3 to 5 of the jobs that you're interested into that you're interested in, copy and paste them in the chat GPT and look for common attributes and start there. That's what I would do. And try to check every box you can, but also just remember that you're going after competency and experience. You're not going after checking a box and memorizing your way through a test, because at the end of the day, you're going to forget it right afterwards if you're just memorizing your way through a test.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So when it comes to that, that moves on to our second step, which would be to, once you've picked a certification that you want to obtain, you need to review the exam objectives for that certification and then take practice exams. So if you're looking at the exam objectives and the information seems familiar, try a practice test and see how you score. You know, if you do really well, and you might be a lot more ready for the exam than you could, analyze the areas that you score well in and not well, and focus on the ones that you don't do. Now, the reason that I said if the information seems familiar, try the practice test, is because if it's not familiar, you're going to really discourage yourself, and you're going to, you know, if you go take a practice exam with a test that you literally have no idea about anything on it, you're really going to discourage yourself, and you're going to feel like you don't know anything. You're never going to be able to pass the certification. My advice would be that if you don't know when you're going to do it, you should find some type of video series to follow along with, whether that be something on Udemy, Pluralsight, or just a free one on YouTube, and study along with that. Each of these things, though, give yourself a deadline. So basically, this is the step that I think that you should schedule the exam, because, and that sounds crazy, like very beginning, but it gives you a deadline, because I see people take these very, you know, simple certification exams and they set them up for like, they basically give themselves a mindset, hey, I'm going to study for this certification, and once I know enough, then I'll go take the exam. But it just gets it way delayed. You know, it shouldn't take, you know, honestly, 6 months to study for Security Plus. It, you know, I was talking to a guy one time that he had a bunch of like SANS certifications, and we were just having a conversation one time, and he told me Security Plus should take 5 days. And, you know, that's, I'm not saying that's the standard, but he basically told me about that. And when I was going through and I had to take my Security Plus exam, I basically just thought about that. I'm like, you know what, I'm going to try to get Security Plus in 5 days. And I just did it. Because if you give yourself a deadline and you just give yourself hard deadlines, like I'm going to attain this by this date, and you set stuff up to study, then you can do that. And I think, you know, the thing is, I put a ridiculous amount of work in, but I just wanted to get it done. And I think that's the thing that you're going to find that we're going to advocate when we're talking about this, is we're talking about doing things quickly and efficiently, but what it takes is ridiculous amounts of work, you know, lots of study, lots of work. I mean, especially since doing WGU, I pretty much took all of like the different free leisure things that I do and just set them to the side for a little bit, because I'm taking time and personally investing in my career and basically the rest of my life. And so I'm earning certifications, working through this coursework. And so given these hard deadlines, it works. And Paul can talk a lot about that. I know you've made a lot of different posts going about pocket prep at the gym and different things like that.
Yeah, I mean, really just breaking down, like Austin was saying, the video courses and whatnot. I mean, they tell you how many hours they are. Like, if you have 21 hours of material to go through, sit down and go through an hour per day, schedule it out. And honestly, like, sure, everybody thinks that I'm just sitting here at home and I don't have a full-time job and, you know, I'm just studying and studying and studying, but that's not the case. The reality is that I am being insanely consistent. That's it. But yeah, just map it out. If you have 20 hours of some content material, you can schedule in your practice test. Just map it out, like make a plan, and after you make that plan and it's realistic, just schedule the test. The best advice I ever got, because when I first was thinking about taking the Security Plus, I didn't know when I was going to take it and blah 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 blah. And someone gave me the advice like, hey, until you schedule it, it's not going to be real. And I'm like, you know what, you're right. So I scheduled it that day. And I was like, well, that's the deadline. The one thing that I've noticed too is sometimes you're actually ready sooner than what you think. And with WGU, I kind of was able to learn that about taking these exams, because if you fail the first time, you get a second attempt. So I kind of had like, a safety net there. So you can kind of like be a little bit more aggressive if you have those resources available. And honestly, that's kind of my standard operating procedure now. I schedule a test as a stakeholder. And then when I'm ready, I just reschedule it for that day and I take it. I took my PMP last night because I felt like I was ready. I just scheduled it an hour before the test started. So I just was like, yep, all right, doing
Yes.
this. Huh?
And you
Yeah.
passed.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll leave
Yeah.
that information out.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah. Um, yeah, and I think actually scheduling it and yeah, mapping out a plan. You need to sit down and be methodical about these things. But the 5 days thing, I actually think that is actually accurate. But
Mhm.
just keep in mind you're going to have to set aside, like I imagine you probably studied somewhere between like 30 to 40 hours total over those 5 days, would you say? Or
It's hard to say because I've been doing stuff similar to it for a long time. I felt like I was just reviewing it, like stuff that I did on Try Hack Me, and
but it was a significant part of your day for five
yeah,
days, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
at a minimum. So like, so it's not like, oh, 5 days. Like I kind of just,
Just casually chilling out, look at my
yeah,
phone every once in a while, and review
yeah,
stuff. No,
no,
you're studying,
yeah,
and it's work, and
yeah,
that's the thing. Security Plus will take you 6 months to study if you don't do anything for 6 months and you just kind of casually check it every once in a while and you're looking at it. But like, these exams, and this is the thing that I've noticed about certifications. They change people's lives. All right. I look all day long at LinkedIn and I see people that are trying to get into the industry that have certifications, and I see people that are trying to get into this industry that don't have certifications. And, I'm not trying to be mean to anybody, but the people that take the open to work banner down are the ones that get the certifications and put the work into it. And it's like, it doesn't really help to just put, studying for Security Plus in your, bio. Like literally, especially like if you're not employed right now, you're looking for a job, 1 week, just sit down. There's an app that I'll put in the description of this video on YouTube that you can download for Security Plus. You can answer, it gives you like 1,000 questions to offer on the app. You can set a deadline for the test, and it tells you how many questions you need to answer a day. And I guarantee you, if you follow all of those questions and you answer that like 100 questions every day, then that shouldn't be bad. Because something that I've always looked at, even if you get into, because right now, I mean, you see like different layoffs and things like that, and that's horrible for people to go through. But one of the best advice that I ever heard when it comes to uh, having a job or not having a job is that regardless, even the days that you don't have a job, that basically when you're not employed, that your full-time job is trying to get employed. And it was like you wake up, in 9 to 5, you are working on getting a job. And then you clock out at 5 o'clock basically. And you're not getting paid for it, but you're working. And so it's like if you're trying to get an IT job, you're laid off or something, you want to add another certification to your resume, then you wake up on Monday morning at 9 a.m. and you get started and you work for 8 hours. You take breaks in between, take your lunch or whatever, but work at this stuff and you'll see the results. And I think that's one of the things that can be a struggle sometimes, and especially that's a struggle when you don't schedule the exam and actually give yourself a hard deadline. It is very easy with these exams to feel like, oh, I'm not sure I'm ever going to be ready to take this exam, especially if you just struggle with that mindset. But if you schedule it out in advance, you'll have a much more likely chance of actually getting it done by that day, probably even before then.
and
So,
one
yeah, go
and
ahead.
one thing I just want to add to that, and this is going to be harsh, but this is me. So, um, I like if I was an employer, if you can't set deadlines for yourself and meet them, why should I hire you? And like straight up, why should I hire you if you can't even meet your own deadlines, like to provide for yourself?
Mhm.
Like you need to get into the habit of doing that now.
Yep.
And there's a lot of people on LinkedIn with all these like super like lovey-dovey posts about like, oh, you can do it and all that. Like if you have no experience and you think that like you can just like walk in based on like I'm gonna do this, like no, you need to show people like, hey, I can set a deadline, I can set a goal, and I can learn this material and I can comprehend it and pass a test.
Yeah, and
That's part of what certification's for. And Austin, you were talking about it, like that's why certifications change people's lives.
yes.
Because posting on LinkedIn, like, oh, I really love cybersecurity. Here's this chat GPT like thing I pulled off the internet. Here's a super basic post about cyber threat intelligence. Like,
Right.
I'm not gonna hire you because you can pull Google an article off Google. Like I could do that myself.
That is the one thing that I think is extraordinarily underrated when it comes to obtaining certifications is that they validate your competency, they validate your experience. To an employer, they validate this person is serious because these certifications cost money. All right. When you pay for these certifications, you are, you're taking a risk, even if, like Paul, I know you were able to get a lot of this stuff done just from is it the GI Bill?
So there's a program in the military called Cool. Every branch has a Cool program, and
Mhm.
if you're enlisted in the Marine Corps, you can take a long list of certifications depending on your job in the Marine Corps,
Mhm.
one time for free. And
Yeah, and so
yeah,
it's not unlimited vouchers, but it's one, so if something failed, then you'd have to go pay for it, for the
yeah.
next one. And it's like with WGU, you're like I paid out of pocket for a lot of the stuff that I had to pay for there. And it's like to an employer, it's like, look, I'm making a professional investment on myself. And when you're going out and getting a certification, all you're doing in my mind is you're just showing someone that you're that much more serious about getting into the industry. So it's there's a whole lot to it, and I think certifications do a lot. They don't do everything. They don't guarantee you a job, especially certain certifications. They pretty much don't guarantee anything, in some cases. But adding a lot of these to your resume, it can show that you're serious, and I think that you'll find it really helpful. Step three is more specific just to CompTIA and WGU students, but I feel like we're going to have a lot of people following along from WGU going through it. With WGU, you get access to CertMaster Learn. And one thing that I've found helpful is basically in CertMaster Learn, you get legitimate simulated PBQs that are very similar to what you are actually going to see on all the CompTIA exams. And, there's different practice tests that I've taken before that are like Jason Dion has a lot of stuff. And when you go through, I usually before an exam, I'll take his full length practice exam for whatever the course is at the end, just because I think it's a helpful place and it highlights the exact areas that you would need to restudy if you have a problem with it. But with this, when you're going through, he does like simulated PBQs, but they're garbage because and he's doing as much as he can with the platform. I'm not just trying to bash the guy, but like a PBQ is going to be like 15 to 20 different responses, sometimes ones that you need to type in that aren't multiple choice. And it'll basically be like I remember for A plus, he like had a picture of an entire motherboard and it's like this is a simulated PBQ where you'd have to label like all the components of the motherboard. And there was just like a red box around one tiny component and that literally said USB on it. And it's like, what is this for? It's like USB port, So, but like an actual one, that CompTIA would give you would be a lot significantly more difficult than that. And I think usually like per exam, you're going to get like access to like 10 to 15 different PBQs. And I just, I would recommend that you answer all those because those are the heaviest weighed ones on the test. They're, something that's going to be a lot more difficult. So I would recommend that you do that. But that's not going to be specific to everybody. I just wanted to throw that in just because of who our audience is most likely going to be. But even if you're not, going to WGU and you're not feeling confident about a certain exam, I don't think Cert Master Learn would be a bad investment for you just because of those PVQs. But whatever you want to do there.
So I was gonna say too, Austin, like kind of building off of that. For certain tests, certain resources are not necessarily optimal. So if you go on Reddit, I highly suggest people go on Reddit and just look at like what the general consensus is as to what the most accurate practice exam is. Because if a practice exam is too hard, like it's gonna destroy your confidence, and you're not and you're not also not being evaluated properly. Find one that's the closest and is the most helpful. Look for some consensus in like the Reddit post or whatever community you're a part of. Like for instance, when I was studying for CISSP, there's a video series called like Thor Peterson or something like that, and his questions are hard because they're wrong. His questions are hard because they're worded poorly and they're inaccurate. And someone sent me those questions like, "Oh, check this out." And I was like, "This ain't jiving." So I looked up on Reddit, and sure enough, the consensus on Reddit are his questions are poorly worded and inaccurate.
Mm.
So I very quickly like disengaged from that and just went back to Boson, because Boson and other applications are better reviewed. But it's going to be different for every test. Like it's going to be entirely different for every test. So just look for that consensus, especially if you're at WGU where you have access to so many resources. It's kind of hard which one to choose sometimes. So
Yeah. Well, and one thing just to continue on with that, I think that there's a lot of people when they're studying for these exams that they overstudy significantly and they learn and take way longer than they need to. At the end of the day, when you go and put these certifications on your resume, we mentioned this just before we started, but for Security Plus, in order to pass, you need to score 750 out of 900 points. If you score a 750 compared to the person that scores 900 and get every single question right, you get the exact same certification. You can, screenshot your score and put it on LinkedIn and tell everybody how smart you are, but you get the exact same certification. It doesn't matter how high you score. It's a pass fail type of thing. That's what every single one of these certifications is: pass or fail. You don't get a GPA, you don't get, anything like that. It's pass fail. So don't overstudy and don't just, flood your mind with information and take it as soon as you feel like you can pass. That's all that matters, is that you pass it. And so bringing it around to the last part would be just to take a full simulated exam and see how you score. And if it's well above passing, then just bump your exam up to immediately. If it's not, then maybe go back and review the different areas again. And specifically, I know that there's a lot of people that get test day anxiety, and you just get really stressed out about it. And so one thing that you can do is just to set up a complete dry run appointment. Set your room up the exact way that you would on test day. Let people you live with say that you're going to be doing it just like you would on test day. Have everything go completely through, just like normal. Like simulate checking in. Take a practice exam. It might even be helpful, especially if you're doing this from home, which I think most people are doing a lot of it from home. You can even like proctor yourself, like set up a recording, and just like you're going to have the camera on. Like I've got my camera on obviously right now, and there's a blue light on. Some people that blue light really freaks them out. I don't know. That's just what it is. But set it up to record. Just get used to it. The camera's going to be on you. Someone's going to be watching you. So do all these different things. If your test is going to be, 100 questions or 150 questions or whatever, then take a test that's going to be 150 questions and just completely do that. And I think that by the time that you get done with all of that, it's like you've already done this before. And then you get to the actual exam yourself, And it's just going to be, I've already done this. I know how to do it. And it's going to be like your second run when in reality it's just your first, So these things I think will help a lot with
Yeah.
the exam anxiety.
Yeah, and that's essentially just exposure therapy to overcome your anxiety. You're kind of exposing yourself to the experience as best as you can beforehand. And that's a really good practice for people who have test day anxiety to kind of go through the steps and simulate it as best as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. So going into the exam day leading up to it, you need to be confident going into it. You don't want to start this exam when you got the proctor watching you and you're just sitting there feeling like you don't know the information and like you don't know anything. Like one thing for me, it's kind of a corny thing, but if I've got an exam scheduled, most of my exams I schedule on the weekend. I study on a Sunday afternoon. Well, I schedule them for like on a Sunday afternoon. I come home in the afternoon, do the exam, and then, that's it. But I'll basically like tell myself throughout the week that like, I don't know. I'm a very, I don't know why I think about things this way, but I just think about things, I think very deeply just when I'm walking around and whatever. But like when I would leave work on Friday, it's like next week when I come back here, I'll have a certification, or whatever that I'm studying for. And it's just like the next time that I, walk into this building, I'll have this certification or something like that. And just like putting this into my mind like all week long, like I'm going to have this certification. For pretty much every certification that I test, I'm pretty much telling myself going into the exam, I basically already am, Network Plus certified. I basically already am Security Plus certified. I just have to actually get the credentials to validate that, because I have the same knowledge that somebody that has this certification does. It's just a matter of actually getting the certification and obtaining it.
And that's the exact purpose of certifications.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what they are in practice. So, I mean, that makes complete sense.
Yeah. Don't let the exam become a mountain in your eyes. Don't, like we've been talking about that. It's not that big of a deal. Don't make it into that big of a deal. One thing that I know some people do, and this might be unpopular uh information or advice or whatever, I do not recommend just cramming a bunch of information last minute to try to pass the exam. For me, whenever I've tried to do that, it just stresses me out more and just makes me feel like I don't know the information that's going to be covered on it. If you just do a dump, because for me, I just try to relax. I mean, literally, like I talked about earlier, just like eliminating leisure time right before the exam is leisure time. I'm usually on my phone just watching some random video on YouTube that has nothing to do with IT. That's just for me.
So I would say, Austin, certain exams definitely require you to have a certain mindset, especially the CISSP, CISM, PMP, etc. It would pay to like listen to a video, but this is not like the cramming that you're talking about, but I just want
Mhm,
to go over this. Something I've used a lot that I try to use are last minute review guides.
mhm.
Like some of like Dave Chappell's last minute review guides are like 17 pages long, 16 pages long, and they just hit over the key topics and go over what they are. And the day before an exam, I'll just read through that throughout the day. And then
Mhm.
the day of the exam, I'll just read through it. But I'm not like sitting there like going crazy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But for the CISSP, there was like a mindset video of like why you will pass the CISSP. And basically all it really did was go over like the mindset associated with passing the CISSP.
Right.
So like last minute things like there to kind of like prime your mind on like what it should be focused on and go over key concepts. Because
Mhm.
who knows, maybe there's one thing that you read over that comes up on the exam and you're like, oh, I'm glad I reviewed that like real
Yeah.
quick before this. Um, but I do think that like over studying and like cramming like crazy right beforehand is not helpful. And you also touched on brain dumps.
Mhm.
Brain dumps kind of reminds me of exam dumps. There are exam dumps out there. I didn't even know they were a thing
That's what I was referring to.
until somebody on LinkedIn like mentioned them to me. So I like Googled like what they were. And I was like, how is this a thing? Like there's actual like leaked questions. And honestly, the one thing that made me glad about the CISSP, there's no test bank out there of any of the CISSP questions, of actual questions. So they do a really good job at guarding that, thank God.
Mhm.
Um, But yeah, it's totally unethical, and it really doesn't help you learn the material. You're just memorizing your way through the test at that
Yeah,
point.
exactly.
And honestly, like if you do that, like you're kind of degrading the value of the certifications that the majority of us actually have studied for. And I probably don't want to be friends with you if you use exam dumps.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, by the
like
time that you get the job, because I made the point earlier, if you score 750 or 900, you still get the same certification. Well, if you use the exam dump, you're still going to get the same certification, but it's going to cost you when you actually get a job, because then you're going to get a job based off of whatever certification because you did a good job in an interview. And then the employer is basically going to find out you don't know anything.
you're an imposter. You don't have
Yeah,
imposter syndrome. You
yeah,
are an
right.
imposter.
So it's not helpful. And then the thing is, you hurt the people that actually do work hard and earn this certification, because now that hiring manager is like, wow, people that have this certification don't know anything. No, the person that you hired just actually cheated on the exam, basically. Because honestly, I really do equate using an exam dump, brain dump, whatever you want to call it, basically cheating, because you're just trying to memorize questions. You're not actually studying the material. And so, if you're doing it, that's not actually going to work out for you. So that's goes under things to avoid. Do not do that. Another thing to do, um, I wouldn't make a giant announcement that you're going to take an exam. Paul did that for the CISSP.
There's a backstory to that.
Yeah,
There's a reason. I can go through that real quick if you
yeah,
let me clarify. So I understand what Austin's getting at here. Don't make a big announcement, because then if you fail, you're kind of like throwing it all out there. If that's not something you're comfortable with, then definitely don't do that. If that's going to have some kind of adverse effect on you. Personally, if I were to have failed one of my exams, to me it would have been a comeback story. I would have turned it into some kind of story, and it would just give me accountability and transparency. That's how I would see it. But some people, it would discourage them to have to post like, "Hey, I failed today."
yeah.
Um, for the CISSP, what Austin is referring to, I took a practice test for the CISSP and I was passing. And I was like, wow, maybe I should just take it, full send. Like, let's go. And so I posted a poll asking my network what they thought, fully intending for that poll to talk me out of it. Well, 93% of people responded saying I should take it in like a week, like in 5 days. And I was like, all right, well, this is interesting. And I, messaged a few people, asked some questions, and I decided to take it. So I made a post about like, hey, thanks for your support. Like, I'm gonna do this and see what happens. And I passed. And the reality is like I like when I left for the exam that morning, I was like a little bit emotional as a Marine can be, I guess. And I was thinking to myself, like, wow, like I have never felt this supported by like a community in my life. Cause like when I left for that test, like I was thinking about everyone who commented, all the people who were super encouraging and all that. And when I passed, like it made it that much more rewarding. So like on a networking note, like involving your community in that, like it's good for you and it's good for your brand and it's good for the community to be a part of it, because then it inspires them if you actually do pass. So that honestly was a great experience for me. However, if you think you might fail and if the consequences of that would really hurt you like emotionally, then I recommend maybe proceeding with caution, like going down that path.
Yep. Yeah, so with that, it brings us to our conclusion, and basically what Paul was talking about, reaching out to other people. We want to offer ourselves. You have questions about certifications or anything like that, look down through our LinkedIn. I probably don't have as many as Paul, but if you see a certification that one of us have that you would be interested in obtaining, shoot us a message and basically ask for advice or anything like that. I think that we can help. But this has been our episode of Full Sun Cyber talking about certifications. I think that we went through a good step here, good methodology. Adopt this, work on these things. These certifications are not impossible. We can definitely do it. But as always, make sure you like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe, all the different things that you're supposed to say at the end of a YouTube video to make your channel grow. But
Yeah, like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notifications button.
yeah, hit the notification bell. But hope you guys enjoyed this. Hopefully we'll have some new content out in the next couple weeks for our next episode. Don't know what it'll be yet, but I know that it will be for you and to help you in your career with cybersecurity.
See you, everyone.